Hey everyone, welcome to Massachusetts Sports Central. This is our NFL Power Rankings after Week 9 of the season. Just to remind everyone what these Power Rankings are, this list represents how likely we think that each team will win Super Bowl 52. It is not necessarily an ordered list of the best teams. It also isn't a random list based on who beat who last week. So basically, this list should be less reactionary than many of these types of power rankings you see. The middle of the rankings are definitely difficult to nail down, and there are a lot of disappointing teams this year. Basically, I kind of want to rank about a dozen teams between 20 and 25, but can't do that. So on to the rankings. Number 32, the Cleveland Browns. They were on bye this week, so they didn't lose. That seems like pretty much the only way they're not going to lose this season, the way things are going. They are still fairly firmly entrenched in this spot until they give me a reason to think that they shouldn't be. All right, number 31. Also not moving, the San Francisco 49ers, our other winless team, technically now have a worse record than the Browns because they haven't had their bye yet, so they're 0-9. However, they have generally been better than the Browns, and with the Jimmy Garoppolo trade, if he does play sometime in the next couple of weeks, I do think that they have a couple of winnable games. I don't think obviously the 49ers aren't doing anything of note this season. I do think they have a shot at as many as, maybe 2 wins. But they're not going to be too much better than that under the best of circumstances. All right, number 30, the New York Football Giants, also staying put. I am inclined to move them below the 49ers if the 49ers can actually win a game, especially after the absolute ass-whooping that they got from the Rams this week. These two teams actually do play, so that could definitely be where they could flip in the standings if the 49ers are able to beat them coming up in a couple of weeks. All right, number 29, moving down one slot, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Definitely up there with the Giants as one of the more disappointing teams this season. The only teams that have worse records than them are the 3 that I have ranked behind them. They're totally out of any playoff contention at this point. So, and given this was a trendy pick for some people to at least have in the playoffs, if not possibly winning the division and going kind of deep. So pretty disappointing for them. And they ain't moving anywhere anytime fast. Number 28, the Indianapolis Colts, moving up one slot. They beat the Texans last week. Now that's the Texans... excuse me, sans Deshaun Watson after his ACL tear, and Tom Savage having to come back in on short notice since this injury happened late in the week. But at the same time, they stepped up, they won the game, and the Texans, they still have, they still had their running backs, they still had their, solid, though injury-riddled defense. Even if I had known that Watson was going to be out, I still probably would have picked the Texans in that game. So, kudos to the Colts for doing that. They're not just trying to throw every game at this point. Whatever minor upward mobility they have, though, is definitely capped now that they have officially shut down Luck for the rest of the season. Kind of seemed like they were going that way anyway. But now it's official. All right, so moving on, number 27, the Cincinnati Bengals, moving down 2 slots. So they got beaten fairly badly by a, record-wise good Jacksonville team who definitely has a very good defense. I am still not enamored with them. I don't know how deep we have to get into the season, but I'm just still not enamored with them. Maybe if they can put another good game back-to-back, which is not something that they've been able to do so far this year, I'll be a little more convinced. But anyway, for the Bengals, offense is bad, defense is bad. Even a guy like AJ Green, who you don't really hear anything about, went ape shit and got in a fight with Jalen Ramsey this week. So that locker room is also falling apart, and they're going nowhere this season. Number 26, The Chicago Bears not moving at all. They were on the bye, didn't move them at all. Not too much else to say. They're not a good team, but they're better than a lot of these other teams that are behind them. They might actually be better than some of the teams I have ahead of them as well. But like I said, there's a lot of teams that I just kind of want to rank in a very small space uh, of much smaller number than the number of teams I wish I could squeeze in there. Anyway, number 25, the Arizona Cardinals moving up 2 slots. This is purely because they won and the teams behind them stink. They're 4-4, which is kind of unbelievable given that they are just not a very good team. Possibly one of the worst 4-4 teams I've ever seen in my life. They beat the winless, 49ers twice, so that, that accounts for half their wins right there. Beat the Colts, I believe, if I remember off the top of my head. So I mean, they're beating crappy teams and they're not necessarily killing them either. But they did win. They do have 4 wins somehow. Technically, if they can go crazy at this point, they are still very much in the playoff hunt. But I don't see that happening. I don't think that they will be as good the second half of the season. Maybe pull off 7 wins. I think 6 is a little more likely, given they've had most of their easiest games already. But we'll see. Peterson had another good game. But that's inconsistent as well. Now, at least they're getting something. They weren't getting anything since David Johnson had gotten injured before. So, at least they have something going on. All right, number 24, falling down 4 slots, the Baltimore Ravens. The close-ish loss to the Titans in and of itself isn't that much of a death blow, but now they are below 500. They're in a terrible division, so they're still in second place. But they are definitely starting to slip out of the playoff picture. Now the thing is, in both conferences, but specifically in the AFC, not too many teams are really stepping up. The division winners for the leaders, for the most part, are still pretty solid, but the second and third place teams and whatnot, aren't really standing out. So the Ravens are not totally out of it, but I just don't think they're a very good team. Their offense is terrible, though. They're getting a little bit of a running game, so that's definitely helps. The defense is solid, but it's not like the Ravens defenses of old that could really carry a bad offensive team. They could certainly prop them up, but they can't just purely carry them. Speaking of a great defense that cannot carry a terrible offense, we have number 23 falling down 5 slots, the Denver Broncos. Denver was killed by Philadelphia. Now Philadelphia is really good, so that's in and of itself is not that big of a deal, and there was no way I thought the Broncos were actually going to beat Philadelphia on the road. However, I didn't think that Philly would put up 50 plus on this really good Denver defense. So I don't know if it shows just how good Philly is, or if it shows how much defense does have to depend on the offense doing something for them, or if the defense is just not nearly as good as they were a couple of years ago. I think it's some combination of all 3 of those. If the offense was a little better, it would put less pressure on the defense, and I do think Philly is really good, but I do also think that the Broncos defense is not quite as good as it used to be either. They're still among the best in the league, but again, they're not like the 2015 one, which was so good they were able to carry a crappy offense all the way to a Super Bowl win. This, good defense is likely going to carry the team to maybe a 500 record, and miss the playoffs. Number 22, not moving, the San Diego Chargers on bye this week. Given how much I want to move a lot of teams, the fact that I had a couple teams here not moving and happen to have been on their buys is just a little surprising. Chargers definitely falling to the point where they are definitely already on the fringe at best of playoff contention. Again, that's mostly because nobody outside of the division leaders, for the most part, is really stepping up. So they're not that far behind, but they gotta start winning. If they start falling 3-4 games under 500, there's not too much. There's got to be at least a couple of teams that are going to finish with 9 or 10 wins that don't win their division. So you can't fall too far behind. Number 21, the Miami Dolphins, also not moving. Now, given that they lost again, and it wasn't like last week where they got absolutely destroyed 40-0 by a bad Raven, or not bad, but pretty bad Ravens team. Certainly bad on offense. But they did lose again. They did show a little more life on offense. Cutler had by far the best game he's had this year. So maybe the Dolphins can do something. They are probably in the running with the Cardinals for the worst 4-win team. I'll give it to the Cardinals, but the Dolphins definitely are kind of in the mix with that as well. All right. Anyway, number 20, biggest mover of the week, down 10 slots, the Houston Texans. I thought they were poised to make a move, even with like their injuries on defense, like that made that not as good as it has been or potentially could be. But losing Watson, I think, is big because Savage is just not a good quarterback. Like, a lot of backup quarterbacks and, guys who clearly should not be starters in the NFL are playing this year. Savage has got to be close to, if not the worst of them. He didn't show anything before he got benched for Watson, and he was terrible again this week. Unless he can really turn it around, or they get somebody else, this team is going to be destined to finish pretty low in the standings. They might, at this point, they might actually be lucky to finish ahead of the Colts, which is saying something. And what really sucks for them is they traded away their first and second round picks this year. So if they end up with say top 5 pick, it probably won't be that good, but definitely a top 10 pick is likely. And maybe in the 6, 7, 8 range. They don't get the benefit of and their picks at least in the first and the second round. So it's kind of tough to have a bad season and not even reap the small benefits that you usually get for that. All right, moving on. Number 19, the New York Jets moving up 5 slots. I think the Bills are actually a pretty decent team, and the Jets took it to them and beat them pretty badly. And that keeps their playoff hopes alive, to be honest. Like I said, there's no teams are really pulling away in the AFC. They're under 500, but they're 4-5. That's better than a lot of the other teams we were talking about. They're still in last, but they're not that far out, and now they've beaten. They're 1-1 against Miami, and they are 1-1 against the Bills. So there's no real tiebreaker there. So they I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I don't think they'll even be particularly close when the end comes. But like I said, they're not out of it yet, and they've definitely stepped up in a lot of these games and are doing way better than pretty much anybody expected them to this year. All right, number 18, moving up 1 slot. This is one of those examples of how I wanted to rank a lot of teams in the low 20s, but there's just only so many slots I can do it. The Green Bay Packers actually moving up 1 slot, despite losing kind of badly, and Brett Hundley kind of showing that he is one of these quarterbacks who's probably doesn't really deserve to be a starter in this league. Now, he was not as bad as somebody like Savage. In the end, his numbers were decent. Now, some of that was because he got some good garbage time stats thrown up there. But unlike, say, if Rodgers was still in there, then I would just say those are pure garbage time stats. He didn't have a good game, and he just padded his stats at the end when the game was out of reach. And I would say that about anybody who was a real starter. But with Hundley, I'm actually going to say it's kind of good because I think they opened up the playbook a little bit more and let him do a little bit more once the game was out of reach and there wasn't as much pressure. So like maybe after seeing that they can maybe have a better beat on what he's good at and might be able to exploit that better moving forward. Obviously that's a little bit of a reach, but he also, even at the beginning of the game he was somewhat effective. He started off, I think he was like 7 for 8, but he only had like 27 yards. So I mean they have to throw it a little bit deeper. If he can be accurate and hit the guys, he doesn't have to be throwing 40, 50-yard bombs, but maybe like 5 yards to the to the running back and wide receiver, as opposed to like, throwing it right at the line of scrimmage and hoping the guy can get a few yards. Um, so really, Green Bay probably should be lower than this, but give them one more week. And technically they are 4-4. They are still tied for second in the division, so it's not. They could turn something around, and it does not have to be a lost season, though it's starting to get a lot closer to that. All right. Speaking of maybe not having a lost season, number 17 moving up 6 slots, the Oakland Raiders. So they won this week. They're back to a unamazing but not horrendous 4-5. That's actually good for second place in this division. And kind of right on the cusp of playoff contention. If they can put back together the team that like people are expecting them to be coming into this year, they could still make some noise. Now they have a fairly tough schedule, so I don't think that's a given that they're going to be able to do that. They'd really have to step up and beat a couple of good teams in order for that to happen. But it's not out of the realm of possibility, and they certainly have more potential than a lot of the teams behind them at this point. All right, number 16, moving down one slot, the Atlanta Falcons. Losing that game to the Panthers was big. If they had won that, they would have been right back into legitimate contention. With that loss, now they are securely in third place in the division, and are not attractive in the tiebreakers either. And it obviously makes it a lot. So now they're behind the Panthers for a wild card spot, and they're behind several other teams as well. And catching the Panthers is looking a lot more difficult. Or the Saints, if the Panthers somehow are able to overtake the Saints for the division. So the Falcons could be one of those Super Bowl losers that fail to make the playoffs the next year. Has happened many, many, many years. It didn't look like that way early in the season, but it's starting to look more and more like that's a legitimate possibility for this team. And really the big problem is they just have not been able to get the offense going. Even though they have almost all the same guys back from last year, it is just not clicking. Ryan hasn't had as good a year. You could say it has a lot to do with Sarkisian just not being as good of a coordinator as Shanahan was. It's hard to say exactly what it is, but this offense is like nothing, is thoroughly mediocre this year when it was like an all-time very good one last year. So this is kind of like Oakland. They still have the potential to make something happen, but if they don't start doing it soon, it ain't gonna happen. All right, number 15, the Detroit Lions moving up one slot. They beat the Packers. Obviously, that's a big divisional win. And the Packers still were actually ahead of them at that point. So now they won that game. They have the same record. They have edge in the tiebreakers at this moment. So that's certainly good for them. I'm not going to get too excited by them beating the Packers, a somewhat depleted Packers team, but they did, and they did it fairly convincingly. The game was really not as close as the score, because as mentioned when we were talking about Green Bay, some of the garbage time stuff. The Lions certainly have the potential to turn it around again, like a lot of these other teams right around here. They were pretty good early in the season. I've thought they were going to be pretty good this season. I think that they still could make a little bit of noise. Stafford's good, though I don't think he's as good this year as he has been in some other recent years. The running game kind of stinks. The defense is nothing special. It's not terrible. Like, I think a lot of people thought they were going to be really bad coming this season. I didn't think they were going to be that bad, but there's certainly nothing special. So, um, again, if they can like really put something together and get clicking, they could make some noise, or they could kind of just waddle through the rest of the season and be 500-ish, give or take. So we'll see. Number 14, moving up 3 slots, the Washington Redskins. That was a big win for them. They were down late. A lot of people get on Cousins for not being clutch. Seattle at home is very tough to beat. So the fact that they were able to come back and win a game that they were down late at the clink, pretty big deal, and certainly kept their fringe playoff hopes alive. And definitely that's a blow to the Seahawks, especially the way the Rams have been playing. So that was a pretty big win for them, and deservedly they need to move up a few slots for that. All right, number 13, falling down 5 slots, the Buffalo Bills. Like I said a little earlier, I still think the Bills are a legit team. They have a really good defense, though it did not show up on Thursday when the Jets put up 34 on them. So they certainly can't let that happen with any regular basis if they want to be a real playoff team. But let's call that a Thursday night aberration, because you see that stuff on a fairly regular basis. If that is not who they truly are, and more of a, like I said, one-time fluke, this is still a pretty decent team. They're still in playoff position at this point. Solid second in the AFC East, which is the best division in football right now. Easily the best record. So that does count for something. Also liked Tyrod. Like, he catches a lot of crap. Let's see what he can do with Kelvin Benjamin. I'm not a huge Benjamin fan, but he's not a bad receiver. I just don't think he's an elite number 1 receiver. But but he certainly could be a lower tier for number 1 receiver, or a pretty good second receiver on a lot of teams. So that's better than a lot of the weapons they currently have. So let's see what Tyrod can do with that to go along with the running game and the solid defense. All right, number 12, moving up 2 slots, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They won, but they beat a pretty bad Cincinnati team, so I'm not going to overdo it on that. But they did win. They did win pretty convincingly. They have a good record. They are technically in second place because the Titans beat them in their first meeting this year. So until they have their second one, the Titans definitively have the tiebreaker over them, and they have the same record. The defense is legit. Like, there's no denying it's a very good defense. One of, if not the best in the league. So that's going to carry a lot of things. Fournette obviously has been very good this year. The big thing I'll take away from the Bengals game is that they did that without Fournette. They scored, I think, like 23. So they did that, and Bortles actually had a good game. You don't see that too often. So I guess that's the key. If Bortles can actually settle down and be competent and not be a turnover machine, which, he hasn't been for the most part this year. So if he can keep that up, then the Jags are definitely a legitimate team. And also, so with the Texans having the Watson injury to go along with all the other problems that they've had, kind of now looks like a 2-team race from what was a 3-team race before. So it's just Jacksonville and the Titans. So that's that obviously boosts the Jaguars' potential to get into the playoffs and win the division significantly. And as we discussed last time, they have a really easy schedule coming up for the most part. So they should be able to at least be, I'd be surprised if they don't at least, if they don't make the playoffs, they're going to miss it like first team out kind of thing, just because they have a pretty easy record. And and they have been playing well this year. I mean, I have them 12. That's a playoff team, and, pretty high in the standings here. And, I don't know. Like I said, I'm still not totally sold on them, just because I just don't believe in Bortles. But that's pretty much the biggest reason. All right. Anyway, Moving on, number 11, the other team we were just talking about is their basically only real rivals at this point, the Tennessee Titans, also moving up 2 slots. Um, they have the same record. Tennessee did already beat them head to head, so they are technically ahead of them until Jacksonville has a chance to match it in their second game, or Tennessee totally putting them away with the second win. Um, the Titans have been a little bit of a disappointing team to me, but they have the good record. They're still 5-3, so they're no way out of it, and they're not like they're not like the Giants or the Bucks, who have a terrible record and have been disappointing. I just haven't been impressed with the way the Titans have been playing, even though they have been able to scratch out some wins. Now I do think they're a talented team, so that's one reason why I have them a little bit higher. Because I do think that if they can kind of get their heads totally right, that they could be better than they have been so far. And given that they already have a solid record, that they could really they could make some noise. I'm not banking on it at this point, but they have a lot more potential than most teams to really step it up at this point compared to how they played so far this season. All right, number 10, moving up 1 slot, the Carolina Panthers. Yeah, that was a nice win over the Falcons. Falcons are definitely disappointing this year, but that's a win that they needed because they were right behind them in the standings. It's a division game, conference game. Those are important ones when you start getting into the playoff hunt. Kind of similar to the Jags, I'm just not sold in this team. Cam is not a bad quarterback, but he's not a great quarterback. He's been very hot and cold this year. And, they did just trade away Benjamin. As I said during the Bills blurb, I don't love Benjamin by any stretch. But again, like, this is a team that did not have very many weapons. And, with Olsen out and with McCaffrey being meh, that was kind of a surprising move. Defense is good. I don't think it's great, but it's definitely good. And they've been able to get it done so far this year. I'm still not convinced they're going to make any noise if they do make the playoffs, but at this point they are definitely in a fairly strong playoff position. All right, number 9, moving up 3 slots, the Dallas Cowboys. The freaking Cowboys are the hardest team to rank by far. Beyond the fact that they have been kind of inconsistent this year, good some game, really good some games, and really bad some other games. But they've been good the last couple of weeks, and they beat a very good Chiefs team this past week, so that's a big thing. But again, you thought Elliott was going to be out for a suspension, but they got this injunction, and now we're not sure what's happening again. Technically, he should be suspended for this next game, but they're going to apparently have hearings on Thursday, so God only knows where they're going to be. I am probably going to see if I can hold off my game picks until I hear exactly what's happening there, because that could change things. Maybe not. Who knows? Exactly, but it's as I've said many times in these power rankings, the Cowboys probably don't deserve the slot that they're in. They either, if he gets suspended, especially at this point, because at this point, if he gets suspended and it costs them a couple of potential wins, like that might be enough to keep him just straight out of the playoffs. Or even worse, if it drags out a couple more weeks, but then comes down so like he potentially would miss a playoff game if they had one. They've probably ranked several slots too high. However, if it eventually gets a stay to at least like kick the can down to next season, a la like the Deflategate thing a couple of years ago, suspension ended up happening, but a full year after it originally was supposed to. This team probably could be 2 or 3 slots higher easily. So again, this is where they are. Not really happy about it. Like I said, should either be higher or lower, depending if we could actually figure out what the hell's going on with them. All right, number 8, falling down 4 slots, the Seattle Seahawks. If they had won that game against Washington, probably would have just kept the standings more or less the way they were from this point on. Aside from the team we'll talk about right after this. But I wouldn't have moved the Seahawks down very much, or I wouldn't have moved them down at all if they had won that game, even though they were kind of mediocre. They would have been mediocre in the win. But now, they lost that game, so that does hurt because they're in a tight division race, and they went from being in first and now they're in second. Um, they're still at the top of the playoff picture for everybody else, but like I said, that's definitely makes it a little bit more competitive. So I still think they're a really good team, but they got to be a little more consistent and have to put it all together on a more regular basis. Like they can't have the defense good one week and then terrible the next week, the offense good one week and terrible the next week. It's they got to have a complete game. They don't need to like rickroll every freaking team, but they should play like their brand of football where they should be able to score a decent number of points while holding the other teams to like low teens. And they just haven't been able to consistently do that this year, and until they can, there's going to be some problems. All right, number 7, also moving down four slots, the Kansas City Chiefs. So after they've lost 3 of their last 4. Like people they haven't really been talking about that much. So like after they lost their first game, like the super shine came off of them, but then people haven't really talked about the fact that now they've lost like a lot of games. They're still 6-3. They're still leading the AFC West, and the AFC West is kind of crappy. So they would have to really fall off badly to not win the division at this point. But they don't look like the top team in the AFC at all anymore, and nobody's really talking about them that way. They kind of have them at best 3rd, and some people maybe even 4th best team in the AFC right now. That's pretty much depending on how well you think of the Jaguars. I don't think that highly of the Jaguars, as I've mentioned, so I still have the Chiefs ahead of them, but that's I've already had them behind the Steelers and the Patriots, but now I think the gap is starting to get a little bit bigger. Like I said, 1 week doesn't make that, and they did lose to a pretty good team, but the defense is definitely showing more cracks than it has in the past. So anyway, we'll have to see about that. All right, moving on. Number 6, moving up 2 slots, the New Orleans Saints. They won this week. They won pretty convincingly again. The defense has still been really good, and at this point you can't think that that's BS anymore. Like its defense is pretty good. Alvin Kamara and the running games has been pretty good, and of course you have Drew Brees, so they can definitely check the box on elite quarterback. So this is a pretty good team. I expect them to do pretty well if they can keep it going like this. All right, number 5, also moving up 2 slots, the Minnesota Vikings. Great defense. Still not sure exactly what to think of the offense. Keenum has shown, again, unlike many of these other backup quarterbacks who've gotten thrown into the games, he actually has been playing pretty well. Not lights out for the most part, but more than serviceable. God only knows if Bradford's ever going to do anything again. Bridgewater is supposed to come back, and he's going to be the backup at least to start. But if Keenum falters, now they have like a guy who was supposed to be your starting quarterback ready to go. Now he's been out for so long, who knows if he's going to be effective or not. But that's a better position than most teams have, the QB position with that have had injuries. But this is a solid all around team. I thought they were going to be pretty good coming into this year. I had them finishing a close second to the Packers when I assumed that Rodgers was playing the whole year. So like I'm not really surprised that they're doing well, and maybe didn't expect them to be quite as good as they have been, but I think this is a good team, and especially with like that really good defense, that could carry them. That could carry them pretty far. All right, number 4, also moving up 2 slots, the LA Rams. So they just absolutely killed the Giants, and that surprised me. Not that they won, and not that they won fairly easily, because I had picked that. I had them winning by 2 touchdowns. But obviously they won by a lot more than that. Put up over 50 on like a Giants team that's supposed to have a pretty offense was supposed to be the problem with that team, especially once people realize that the you know that just a couple of really good receivers isn't enough to make for a good offense. Um, but the defense has not been anything special for the most part this year. At times they've had some moments, but overall they haven't been amazing, and they were just absolutely embarrassed this past week by this Rams team. Oh, excuse me. By this Rams team that is just really good. Just I was so wrong about this team. I thought they were going to be among the worst teams in the league, and they just they found some magic this year, turning because I mean obviously there was some roster turnover, but I mean they have a lot of the main guys that are contributing were on this team last year, so they have just really figured something out, and the coaching staff has got to get a lot of props for turning this team around, and they are dangerous. They're leading the division right now. They could have a couple of home games in the playoffs. This is a real team, and I don't know how far they're gonna go, but I would be shocked if they don't make the playoffs at least at this point. All right, number 3, staying put on their bye, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the two teams immediately behind them lost. So all the other teams right behind. So that's why the Saints, Vikings, and Rams all moved up 2 slots, because they all moved up ahead of the Chiefs and Seahawks, who both moved down 4 slots, and they were the teams that were right behind our top 3 here. So Steelers are on bye. There's not much to say about that. Didn't feel any need to move them based on what the other teams around them did. Still a good team. I still think they're the second best team in the AFC. The gap is getting bigger because I'm starting to have more doubts about the Chiefs. Good offense and good defense. I do worry a little bit about the locker room situation, since they definitely have a little more distractions and have had a harder time keeping things under control. How much that it really matters, who knows? But it is one of the few concerns that you can really put on this team. All right, so also staying put, number 2, the New England Patriots. They were also on their bye, so there's not too much to report there. Knowing a little bit more about the Patriots than I do about most other teams, do think the bye was pretty good timing with them. Obviously, if you remember, Hogan took a pretty bad shot at the end of the last game, and was looking like he might miss some time. So getting some extra rest on the bye. Hopefully he doesn't have to miss nearly as much, or hopefully any. But we'll have to see about that. The defense has definitely come along the last few weeks. If that can hold up. And so the offense actually had regressed a little bit from the high-flying performance that they were having earlier this season. So if they can kind of put both of those together, kind of get, they don't necessarily have to score 35 points or something like that every game again, but if they can get back to averaging in the mid to high, say the high 20s, and the defense consistently gives up under 20, this is going to be a strong team that's going to win a lot of games without too many of them being in doubt. So I still think that they are the best team in the AFC right now. Like I said, the Steelers definitely put up a real challenge there, but I still think the Pats are the best because they always seem to have the Steelers' numbers. They do play each other in a few weeks, so that's going to be a big game for figuring out who the best team in the conference is. All right, and number 1, also not moving, the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles killed the Broncos. That doesn't surprise me. Again, I picked them to win. I picked them to win by, I think, by 15 points. So I didn't in any way think this was going to be a close game, or that Denver had any real chance of winning it. However, I'm shocked that they put up 50 points, over 50 points, 51 points on on that good Denver defense. So, like as I said during the Broncos blurb a while back now, I do think it's a combination of kind of this shows you that it's tough for a defense to overcome a really bad offense, and right now the Broncos are a really bad offense. And I just think that the defense just isn't quite as good as it was a few years ago. However, I don't think they've regressed so much that any old team would be able to do to them what the Eagles did. So I do think the Eagles are among the best I do think at this point in time they are the best team in the league, and I think that would be poised to beat any team that was put in front of them. Now, if that can hold up the rest of the year, who knows? But right now, they are the best team in a pretty strong top of the NFC. I don't think the NFC overall is anything special, though I don't think the AFC is either. But like the top few teams in both conferences, I think are pretty good, and the Eagles, I think, are clearly the best of their conference and probably of the league pretty easily at this moment. So that's where we stand this week. Let's see how we can see. I'm looking forward to the Week 10 games because I think that's going to solidify a lot of these teams' positions. All right. Thanks for watching, and please like, comment, and share the videos, and subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on other social media. Facebook and Twitter are both at MA Sports Central. Thanks, and we will see you soon.